Hello, everybody. How are we all doing today?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another stream. Oh, yeah, we had to
Nice.
do the arrangement. Yeah. How are
Yeah,
you,
yeah. I had
Sabin?
it the opposite
Oh,
way.
sorry.
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's pretty cold and dark in Berlin, so it's currently 5 p.m. and it got dark at around 3 p.m.
Oh,
But
wow.
yeah, I'm getting nice and cozy, hopefully, and looking forward to the Christmas markets that opened up a couple of days ago. So yeah,
Nice. I was a
yeah.
rebel, and before Thanksgiving even came, I put up all my Christmas lights. My house is all decorated for Christmas. I have a new house, so I was the first person on the block to put up Christmas. I was claiming my territory as the Christmas guy. So
Pretty interesting. I think folks here have also set up the Christmas decorations already. So yeah, looking forward to it. Yeah.
nice, nice. Well, as for the stream today, we've got a pretty full schedule. There's a lot of cool stuff. I'm actually really excited for this stream. We've got a couple of really cool guests, and if you saw my tweets, you'll know who they are. If you didn't, I'll leave it up for a surprise, so you'll see when they come on. But it's going to be a lot of fun, and also the release that we're going to be talking about today. I've been hyped about it. This is, in my opinion, it's one of the most exciting releases. It has a couple of features that I've been really just excited to see come out. So I'm really hyped for that. Um, I think to get things started, I'll go ahead and get into the release notes. If I can get my tab open. Um, there we go. Cool. And then, yeah, so I'll transition over to that and we'll talk through the release notes. And we're still here because my screen wasn't shared, but that should be there now. Okay, cool. Awesome. How is the font size? Does that look okay?
It looks okay from my end, but I think we could bump it up a little bit.
Great. Yeah, so this release is 4.7.0. We've got a couple of really cool features, like I said. But before we get into those, we also have a few features that we've been working on and they've been in preview and they're officially generally available now, which means that they're available to use in production. And the kinks have been mostly worked out based on your guys' feedback. So we really appreciate that. The very first one here that I'll mention is the interactive transactions. So this is now generally available. If you're using these, you can remove the preview flag from your Prisma schema. These will be available by default now. And what these are is they allow you to perform database queries and database interactions within a transaction. So as you can see on the screen here, we have a Prisma transaction going, and you can pass it a function. And this is going to get you our Prisma client instance. And within this function, you can perform various operations, updates, deletes, and all of that will be at the very end of the function committed as a transaction. And if anything fails during the process, it'll actually roll back and throw an error. So this is super cool because it allows you that granularity to go in and sort of make updates and perform multiple different functions all at once, and then finally commit them at the end. And then some of the features around that, just to sort of recap, because I know we've talked about these in the past. As of 4.2.0, with this feature, we do have isolation levels. So you could set the isolation levels of your transactions. And then we also have Prisma data proxy support for this feature as of 4.6.0. So both of those are available in the generally available feature, and you can remove this interactive transaction flag from your schemas.
Awesome. Yeah. I think the interesting thing about it is that inside the transaction, you can run arbitrary code inside it. And the classical example is like when you're performing a financial transaction where you credit one account and debit another. You can now perform like if statements to check whether the balance is sufficient, and then execute it. If not, exit, and then and a bunch of other stuff. The other interesting thing is that you can also add retries, I believe. In the event a transaction fails, you can rerun it until the limit of the max retries is somewhat hit. But that's logic that you can define on your own. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's cool. And then at any point with that arbitrary code, if anything fails, if any errors thrown, it'll just no harm done. The database interactions don't happen. So yeah, that's awesome. And this is a feature that we've gotten a lot of requests for in the past. It was something that the community really wanted, for a good reason too, because this is something that if you're working in any sort of complicated interaction or piece of software, that this is something that you're going to need at some point. So it's great to see that finally generally available.
Yep.
The next one here is that we have relation mode now generally available. And what sparked this, and we have sort of an explanation here, is that PlanetScale doesn't allow you to create foreign keys between tables. So what we ended up doing is we've developed something where Prisma under the hood sort of handles that with intermediary tables for you. And this also helped us along with the MongoDB integration, since as a schemaless database, there are no real foreign keys anyways. So this is something that we've had in in preview mode, but it is now generally available. And then right below that, we have a couple of other features that we've released that make this a little bit easier. And the one specifically is these tooltips that help you set up indexes for these type of relation mode fields. And what this is going to do is this gives you some tips on how to set up indexes for your tables and basically for the intermediary tables, because since you aren't using a foreign key, you don't get that indexed foreign key sort of setting that you would. Normally, that would speed up your queries. So in this case, because there is going to be an intermediary table, this shows you how to set up the index automatically just to speed those queries up a little bit.
Yeah. The advantage of the index, I guess, recommendation is that you're preventing, or rather, when the query is being made to the database, instead of having to make a full table scan, you'll have an index scan, I believe. So this will be significantly cheaper, I guess, in terms of cost, because you don't want to have to go through the entire table to find your records. Indeed, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And then so this is another thing where this was in preview mode before, so you should be able to use these just by default now. So those are the two new things that are generally available that have been sort of previewed for a while. But now we have a couple of new things. And this first one is one that I'm really excited about. This is Prisma Client Extensions. And this really gives you the granularity to extend and add functionality to your Prisma client. This just gives you a lot of sort of complex operations that you can develop on your own, just to help you add things that are possibly missing from the client that you might want. You can now add them on your own. What we have is we have a couple of different things that you can add methods to that you can interact with. And these are the models. So you can actually add custom methods or fields to your individual models. The client, so you can add functions to the Prisma client itself. We have like the root level functions like connect and transaction and extend and stuff like that. So you can actually add your own functions. You can add like custom logic around the results of your queries. So for example, if you have a first name and a last name field, you can create like a computed field that would have first name and last name, and then create custom Prisma client queries. And I think we're going to be showing a little bit of how this works later, because there's a lot to this feature. It's one feature, but it allows you to do a lot of different things. So I'm actually really excited for this. But in order to use this, this is a preview feature right now. So you'll have to add the preview feature flag called client extensions. And then you can start using it as it shows here. You would do Prisma client, and then you would .extend. And then there you can set up all of your different extensions. And there are docs already up for this that explain how you can do various operations on the different levels of extending. And those are going to be right here at this link. And then the final new feature is multi-schema support for Postgres. This is one that I'm also super excited about. This is one that the community has been asking for quite a while. And we've just been working out the best way to do it. And we finally got it out where you can now query multiple schemas in your database through your single Prisma client. And in order to do that, you would have to set the preview feature flag for multi-schema, because this is a preview feature. You would define your different schemas within your data source model, and then you can actually specify which schema your model belongs to within the model definition itself. The rest of this works, like once you get past that point, it works just like Prisma normally would. You would do Prisma migrate dev. You can introspect a database that has multiple schemas. All of that's going to work for you.
And a note about the database that already has schemas inside it is that you have to specify the schemas beforehand, before introspecting your database, so that they can be kind of picked up by our introspection system. Yeah.
Gotcha. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as far as new features, that's about it. We also have, as always, our list of fixes and improvements. The team's been hard at work, so we've got a bunch of those. And yeah, so I think we can move on to the next piece. Alex, you had a demo for us, right?
I'll go ahead and share my screen and get ready for the, well, for me, it will be the infinite loop. Well, yeah, I'll go ahead and share it. So yeah, let's get started. So as Sabin mentioned before, one of the features that we shipped on Tuesday was extensions. And to add on what he said, they're like self-contained scripts that allow you to extend, or as the name suggests, the functionalities and features of your existing Prisma client instance. So I'll go ahead and jump over to the demo. Let me find that screen. So in my project, I have a fairly simple Prisma schema. I have a single user model with a couple of fields: an ID, first name, last name, and an isActive field that's a Boolean, email, and then posts, which is a one-to-many relation with the model that's defined here. And if you'd like to define an extension, you can use the extends keyword that Prisma client provides. And in this case, for the first example, we're going to kind of add a custom method to a model inside the schema, a model that exists in our schema. So in this case, I'm giving my the extension a name, which I'm calling it a custom method for the user model. So in the event there's an error, this will be logged for you on the console. And then using the model property, and we're going to modify the user model over here. So the method that I'm defining here is called toggle active. And what it basically does is that it retrieves a user, and then it basically flips the switch on the isActive status of the user. So this would be interesting, like when you want to deactivate or activate the a user account, for example. So yeah, so let's go ahead and run this. So over here, the main function, I'm calling the function prisma.user.toggleActive, which is available here. And what's really nice about it is that when you hover on result, you still retain the default, the type safety that Prisma client provides. And by the way, I should go ahead and share that I'm using a SQLite database with 3 user records. 3 user records and 3 post records. So there's Nico, Sabin, and Matija. And these are all our coworkers, by the way. So yeah, so in this case, I'm going to toggle the status of Nicolas's user account. So we can see that the status on his account over here is true. So I'll go ahead and run the script that executes this. So I have a script called npm run 1. And this logs the output to the console. Is the output visible, Sabin?
Yeah, it looks good.
Yes. So we can see that Nicola's active status has been set to false. And if I refresh on the database side, this is also updated as well. And if I rerun it again, it should still toggle the status. So that's just one example. So yeah. So you can define as many methods as you want within a user model, or you can also define methods that apply to all models. And there's a custom property for that, which is called all models. And so over here, you can go ahead and define the methods that would apply to all models. So cool. So I'll go ahead and jump to the next one.
Nice.
So in the next one, we'll be creating a virtual field called full name, because in our schema, we have a first name and the last name, but we don't really have a full name. So in this case, we'll be computing the result of when we're querying a user field. And over here, we've defined the property or the field, which is called full name. And then we pass a needs object, which defines the dependencies. In this case, we need the first name and the last name fields. And by the way, this is type safe because you can also get the other properties that we need for this extension. And then over here in the compute, it's an arrow function that concatenates the user's first name and the last name, and then it basically returns it. So over here on my function, I'm making a query to request for the first user whose first name is Natalia, our coworker. And when I also hover on the user variable, you also see that the full name variable, the full name property is also included over here. So yeah, and then I'll go ahead and console it here. This parse is a tiny bug that we'll fix in a patch release in a couple days or hours, by the way. So yeah, so I'll go ahead and run it. So I think the script for that is npm run 2. Then there we go. We have the object with Natalia and then her full name, which is computed on the fly. Yeah.
And I'll interrupt here a little bit, and I'll say I can't count how many times I've seen people wanting this exact feature in our Slack messages. So many people have wanted this. So this one is very cool. Yeah. Indeed.
And the other thing that you can do is also exclude fields as you're querying them. And this would be useful, for example, if you have like a passwords field that you don't want to expose to the rest of your code, and you can definitely exclude as you're querying. And we have docs. I think we have docs on that.
Yeah.
Yes. Cool. And then the third and final example is adding custom queries to the Prisma client. In this case, I have a fairly simple example where we'll be using the active record pattern of saving data to your database. So in this case, on my user model, I have a save method, and its dependencies is the ID. And in the computation function, we are returning we're just updating the user record. And then that's pretty much it. After reading this code the second time, I realized that I could have just made this into an arrow. I could have gotten rid of the return function here. So in this case, we're going to use the active record style of updating user data. So in our main function here, we're going to fetch a user whose first name is Sabin, and then in the event of an error, we'll throw it, and then log the initial value so that you can see it. And then we're going to update the first name, is active status, and the email. So I think I can rename this to Leland, if that's okay. And then we are going to throw you under the bus because your email points to Blockbusters, which is a successful business. Yeah. And then after that, we're going to call the save method that we've defined in our extension to update the user, and then go ahead and log it. So if I go ahead and run this, npm run 3, we'll see that the initial value over here was Sabin Adams and Sabin at prisma.io, and then the updated value here when we call the save method is Leland Adams and works at Blockbusters. Yeah.
This right here is super. This is really great because Prisma itself, it is an ORM, but it's also a building block. It's built in a generic way where we don't really force you into patterns like this, where you're doing like active record type patterns. But with this feature, what users can now do is develop a library that uses Prisma and sets up sort of an active record type of ORM that uses Prisma under the hood with minimal effort, without having to set up all of the difficult pieces of the ORM. This is going to open up so many different opportunities for people, for different teams. I've personally talked to multiple teams who have wanted to use Prisma, but they're really tied to the active record style of querying. So this opens up the possibilities for them. That's really cool.
Indeed, it is. You can do a lot with client extensions. The beauty is that you can create your own extensions, publish them on NPM, and then other users somewhere across the world can also use your extensions. And we have docs on that, I believe. So that we covered. Yeah. So you can share extensions and then import client extensions as well. Yeah, and that's about it about the demo.
Great. Cool. Well, with that being done, let's see if I can. There we go. Cool. Yeah, now that we've got that figured out, what we have next is we have a guest, and our first guest today is going to be Ryan Dahl. He's the creator of Deno and Node, and we're just going to have a little bit of a chat with him about what's going on in the Deno world. So let's transition over, and then we'll bring him up on stage to have a chat. Hey there.
Hello.
Let's get these nameplates figured out. There we go. Cool. So how are you doing today, Ryan?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you guys doing? Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, of course. We're excited to have you on. I'm doing good. How about you, Alex? You doing pretty good? Okay, let's see. So Ryan, while we've got you on, why don't you start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself, maybe your story as a software developer and sort of what you're up to right now.
Yeah, I've been a software engineer for, gosh, the last 15 years or so. I actually got started in university studying mathematics and was trying to become a mathematics professor in a PhD program before realizing, like, what am I doing with this life? This is not really applicable to the real world, and dropped out of my PhD program and quickly fell into software stuff. I started working in kind of Ruby on Rails stuff and PHP contracting work, but kind of quickly got into lower level systems programming, kind of Nginx plugins and non-blocking IO type stuff, which, I think this was around 2008 or so. Was thinking a lot about non-blocking IO and web servers and how that could be done more easily in scripting languages when Chrome came out, and with Chrome, V8 came out. And I had the idea that, actually, client-side JavaScript and non-blocking servers are pretty similar. Let's see if we can put these two things together. And that was Node. I mean, it essentially started as a scriptable web server, and yeah, that was it's not. It was clear that it was a fun idea in the first year or so, but it was not clear that literally all programmers and all websites would be using Node like it is today. In the last couple of years, Node has been, I'm not sure how you guys feel about this, but a little slow in kind of picking up new JavaScript features, right? There's been all, the JavaScript as a whole is moving forward at a rapid clip. The web platform as a whole is moving forward at a rapid clip, and Node has been quite slow at adapting to these changes. Async await, for example. A lot of the Node APIs are still callback based. It's what we had back then. I think the transition from CommonJS to ES modules is another area where Node has been. It's still quite painful and complicated when you get into it. And I think the kind of transition to TypeScript as a whole. I mean, I don't know how you feel, but I see TypeScript as essentially the next version of JavaScript, right? It's kind of an extension of JavaScript, and I think ultimately is going to get standardized. There's kind of these proposals for types as comments, where like web browsers will actually be able to understand TypeScript. So anyway, Deno started off as a demo to kind of see what a Node 2.0 would look like, what a modern kind of ES module first, async await first type server-side runtime would look like. And actually it took off. Lots of people started using it, and so we started putting more work into it. And at this point, there's many thousands of developers using this all the time. It is, very similar to Node. I think it solves the same problems. It's server-side JavaScript, but it's more focused on developer experience. It's more modern. You can kind of get up and running without configuring a bunch of stuff. It comes with a bunch of tooling, code formatting, linting, test stuff, TypeScript support out of the box. We also focus a lot on security. So JavaScript as a whole and browser JavaScript as a whole is a secure sandbox, and in Deno we try to bring that to server-side programming. So you can really opt into whether you want file system access or whether you want network access, or you can kind of give an allow list for like different domains that you're going to make network calls to. So really kind of taking the JavaScript is heavily security oriented, and in Node we didn't really focus on that. And then of course performance. We try to make things faster than they were before.
Nice, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So as sort of the creator of Deno and the creator of Node and sort of the mastermind behind these things, do you hope to see more people moving the Deno route, or like seeing this as the next sort of iteration of what Node was? Is this sort of the direction you hope to see people going?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Node is this massive C++ code base that has a ton of legacy stuff. And although it is being used worldwide, it is inching forward, and it is not going to make huge improvements to the ecosystem. We are, in particular, when it comes to adhering to browser standards and kind of keeping the delta between browser JavaScript and server-side JavaScript as minimal as possible. I mean, the most obvious example is like the fetch API. Like when I invented Node, there was no fetch. We just invented some HTTP request API. In the intervening years, fetch was standardized, and there's streams for streaming request and response data with fetch. All of this is like kind of off to the side with Node, right? Node's like dwelling about whether they should take this up or not. And in Deno, this and many other browser APIs are just built in, and we try very hard to keep it close to the browser. Of course, server-side JavaScript is different than the browser, but the future of JavaScript, I think, is always going to be the browser JavaScript, right? That the web is what is kind of the future of the web browser is the future of all web technologies always, and so we really are trying to adhere to that. And yeah, I think people should try out Deno. it's not as arduous as you might think. These days, you can import npm modules, you can import Prisma, you can it is not a different language. It should be very, very similar to what you're used to. With the caveat that we do try to push you towards the future of JavaScript and towards browser standards. And so, when you're kind of reaching for these old world APIs, require, you're going to find that that doesn't work. But that's for a good reason. Like we do not want to be using require anymore, right? We want to be using import.
Yeah, no, that's cool, and I like the point that you're making, that that you're trying to push these things forward, and that you're trying to keep the browser as similar to the server as far as the coding style goes as possible, because I feel like that's the main push that people hear when thinking about developing full stack JavaScript applications, is that you get to write the same code on the client and the server. But like you just said, Deno pushes that even further, where the code is getting closer and closer to being just about the same. So that's exciting to see.
Yeah, I mean, if you go around on MDN and kind of look at various APIs, you'll see at the bottom this little browser compatibility table. You'll find that Deno is truly one of the web browsers. We take this very seriously, and so we have the web platform tests in our test suite, and we try very hard to conform to these. So I'm not just saying this. Like Deno is actually one of the web browsers at this point in a pretty real way.
That's great. That's awesome. I know that there's been a new Deno release. You guys recently had a launch week where a bunch of exciting stuff came out. Can you tell us a little bit about what sort of changed there and what the direction of that is?
Yeah, the biggest change is we've been working on the ability to pull in NPM modules. NPM is fraught with problems, as we all know, and we've been very hesitant to kind of pull in all of this stuff. If you're depending on NPM modules, you are depending on common JS stuff. And so the question is, like, how do we both push the ecosystem forward, but also allow people to make use of all of this very useful technology out there, right, that is published to NPM. And we've come up with a way to do this that is very simple and works pretty well. I'd say 80 to 90% of NPM packages are going to work, including common JS modules. You should be able to load those. But from the Deno perspective, like you as kind of the top level project, you are not allowed to use common JS. You can't use require and stuff. We really force you to be using ES modules and TypeScript and modern browser APIs. But you can still kind of reach into this portal of the NPM ecosystem and basically import any NPM module. Maybe can I give a demo?
Yeah, that would be great, actually. If you want to,
let's see,
share your screen, we can bring it up.
Can you see my screen?
Let's see.
Yep.
Yes. And we'll add it now.
Is this big enough?
Yeah, that's great.
So let me just show using Express. Wait. So whatever, I'm creating a little temp directory here, and let me create a little file. And I'm going to just get the, I'm going to go on NPM here and pull up the Express example here. So, you can basically copy this directly in. Of course, you can't use require. You have to do import express from npm :express. So this is slightly different than you're used to, but that should be the only change necessary here. Gotcha. So this is just going to respond with hello world and listen on port 3000. So we've got this file here, right? And then we can do Deno run express demo, and I'm going to give allow net to allow it to access the network. Again, this kind of security. By default, you get no permissions to access anything on the system.
Gotcha.
This is really for your benefit, right? And it wants to access CWD and a couple of other things. Okay, I think it's running. It didn't print anything, but if I think curl, was it port 3000? I get hello world.
Okay.
So
Nice.
so yeah, that's basically all there is to it. That's a we can, if you're comfortable with all of the dependencies, all the libraries that you're using, you can kind of opt out of the permissions by just doing this -a.
Okay.
Listening. I don't know. Somehow when it's just a blank screen without any prompt, it feels not right. Okay, let's try that. Okay, there we go. You know, you don't see anything. You don't see any node modules folder. There's just this file here. What's happening is there's actually like a cache directory, global cache directory, where the Express source code is being stored. So if I kind of look in this cache directory, you'll see like npm, and in there's a bunch of stuff that's been downloaded, right?
Gotcha.
Let me just to give you a sense of like what it does when you don't have a cache directory. Let me just delete not all of my caches, but the Deno directory, and run that command again. So so I'll just run this, and what it'll do now is download these npm modules. And it's running. So that's basically all there is to it. And again, this is all kind of built into Deno at this point. And yeah, and npm is, you know, how do I stop? Okay. Yeah, so npm is going to be a part of Deno going forward, and you know, should be easy to integrate into any sort of Deno project.
Yeah, it's cool to see how simple that was to get set up without having to run npm install at all. You didn't have to set up anything super crazy. You were just able to run the file and it worked. And I haven't played with Deno that much, but you had also mentioned before, if that were a TypeScript project, it would just run as well, right? You wouldn't have to install any.
Yeah, if your npm module specifies its types, then you just get all of that TypeScript support automatically. I think Express actually depends on the types express. It's not actually included in the npm package. So that one you have to do a little bit extra, which I'd point you to the docs for. But any kind of modern TypeScript modern npm module that actually supplies its types, like Prisma, should just work out of the box with your editor. And of course, I'm very old and using Vim, but of course all of this stuff works very nicely in VS Code, and we have a nice LSP, and basically all this stuff should be working out of the box.
Nice.
And I saw a comment, yes, you can specify a version.
Oh, okay, cool, great. Yeah, that's fantastic.
I really like the simplicity where you just define the import and then the code and then just run it, and then it takes care of everything for you, instead of having to set up a package JSON file and then a couple of scripts perhaps, and then try do the installation yourself. So I definitely like the simplicity of the Deno project.
We try to make it scale down as small as possible. So like if you have a very simple program, and it should just be one file, right? You shouldn't need to have a directory of configuration and stuff.
Awesome, cool.
Yeah, very cool. Alex, did you have any questions for Ryan?
Yes, I only have one question, and it's what features can we see soon on Deno, perhaps? If you can let us in.
Yeah, so we're working very hard on our serverless system. So Deno is actually a Rust project, and unlike Node, which is this like monolithic C++ project, Deno is split into many Rust crates. Actually, probably a dozen or more Rust crates. And we, of course, ship Deno, the executable that you just saw. But we also ship something called Deno Deploy, which is our commercial offering. And this is basically taking those Rust crates and recombining them plus some proprietary code into a serverless system. And this thing is geared towards executing JavaScript at the edge. And so, I was just mentioning how we want to have JavaScript files that scale down to a single file. Like we actually want to have sites and servers that can just be defined. Sometimes things are just simple and you just want to define, if you're writing a little Express server, for example, a little thing that maybe connects to a database, munges around some values, maybe does some auth or something, sends it out the other way. You should be able to define that in a single file, send it up to a serverless system, and essentially host this indefinitely for free forever if it's not getting any traffic. So anyway, we're working on a system called Deno Deploy. This is our serverless system, and it runs JavaScript at the edge. And this is kind of, you don't hear a lot about this from us. Very much behind the scenes undertaking. But I've built 3 JavaScript runtimes in my life. The first is Node, the second is Deno, and the third is Deno Deploy. This is a pretty serious undertaking, and it is not built on other serverless systems. This is really from scratch, and we're pretty excited about this. It's powering things like Netlify edge functions or Supabase edge functions. Actually, behind the scenes, Deno Deploy is acting as the infrastructure there. And so what we're working hard on is making this journey of using Deno, importing NPM modules, using Prisma, kind of very smoothly transition to serverless setups that I'd love to go into more detail about it, but not see some future talk that I'll give. But essentially, this is deploying a server for us is like in a row in a database. We just insert a row in a database, and it's just very, very cheap for us to host these servers. I mean, essentially, we spin up little V8 isolates to respond to requests. So anyway, I think what you can expect is kind of NPM support in Deno Deploy. You can expect Deno Deploy to appear in more places. You can expect kind of that journey from developing locally to deploying worldwide to just feel super, super smooth and nice.
Nice. That all sounds very exciting for sure. I'm seeing a lot of comments too of people who are excited about that. So definitely great to hear. Ryan, we want to thank you for coming on with us and for having a chat with us. It was really cool to get some insight into the world of Deno and where it's going. And yeah, we just appreciate having you on.
Yeah, thanks, Sabin. Thanks, Alex.
Cool. And so at this point, we're going to transition over really quickly, and then we'll have Matija from Wasp on. So yeah, see you, Ryan, and thanks for coming. Hey there, how you doing?
I think
it looks like you're muted.
Yeah.
Usual problems. Hey, all very nice to meet you. Can you hear me, see me? All good?
Yeah,
yes.
Perfect.
Awesome. Excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for coming. We're very happy to have you on. So to start off, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? What's your what have you been working on recently? What's sort of your story getting into development, and what are you? Yeah.
Awesome, sure. I mean, I also prepped a short presentation about Wasp, so maybe I can just talk a little bit about myself first, and then we can go into presentation and demo if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great.
Sure.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, me personally, so the team behind the Wasp was originally me and my twin brother Martin. So it kind of all started, with us developing many applications, different technologies. We were just wondering, is it possible to make, let's say, abstracted interface for building, typical web business apps? So I will save it for the presentation. Yeah, a little bit more about myself and also my brother, because we are twins, so pretty similar. we are both computer scientists, kind of similar to Ryan. We were more into algorithms, machine learning, let's say low-level stuff. But kind of whatever we did in life, we always ended up building web application. Whatever you want to deliver, you have to have a web application. And we regularly spend the majority of our time, that was kind of the hardest part. So that was the motivation behind Wasp, which I'm going to present. Yeah, anything else that you would like to hear before I start, or is that it?
I think for now, I would have asked about like a general overview of Wasplang, but I imagine in the presentation you'll probably be doing that.
So all is going to come in the presentation, so we can just, if there are any questions, I can always address.
Great. Yeah. Well then, yeah, let's go right into the presentation. If you want to share your screen, we can get it up.
That's right. It's always like a new platform has a new way to share screen.
Yeah,
so
of course.
Let me figure out this room escape. Okay, sharing my screen. I will just share maybe entire screen, or I can just do a window. I can even do a Chrome tab. Okay, cool.
Nice.
So this should work. Can you see my presentation?
We can. Yes, perfect.
I'll go into slideshow mode, and I will just move you to the right so I can see you. Okay, awesome. So here's a short intro about Wasp, and then we will also do like a little demo, to show you the code, see how it looks like, and similar. Awesome. So the first thing. So as I mentioned, during our chat, right now, why we started Wasp is kind of motivated by this. I think a lot of people, especially people who are new to coding and web development, they are going to quite quickly become overwhelmed, with all the possible options from tools. And, it was like, starting from just HTML, then JavaScript, then on the client, on the server, jQuery, JS6, you name it, like all the build systems. So it's getting pretty complicated. And this was our main motivation. Although we were senior developers, we also felt, like every, let's say, 3 to 5 years, we have to relearn the latest tech just to be able to build the same thing all over again. So that was our motivation for Wasp. The latest one was React, Node, before like Angular, PHP. So we went through all the stuff. So yeah, the goals with Wasp, regarding to the problem that we are solving, is basically to write much less boilerplate. So ideally, no boilerplate, but of course, that's kind of the goal that we are going towards. Then other thing that proved to be very important to us is figuring out the best practices. Like there is like a new React, or there is like Prisma, or whatever tool is out there. There is always some time that you need to dedicate to actually figure out what are the best practices, how to use this in production. And often the community is figuring it out together with you. So it can be like like doing it together with the rest of the world. So I think simplifying this process is going to be very helpful for people developing stuff for the production. And last, kind of, because it's very easy to get carried away when you are doing a new thing, and I will just do everything from scratch, and I will do my thing, the best ever thing. So for us, it was super important to be compatible with what is out there. So Wasp, with Wasp, basically you are still writing React, Node.js, and I will also talk about plans to support other stuff in the future. But yeah, the main thing is we are not trying to reinvent everything, and although Wasp is technically a language, it is not a competitor to JavaScript or to Node.js or anything similar. So we are trying to reuse as much as possible of what is out there. You can use your npm packages and everything. But you'll see a bit more about that in a second. So yeah, moving forward, the status right now of Wasp. So we are right now, in the middle of our beta launch week. So check it out. You will see like a lot of new cool stuff, features, swag awards going on and similar. We had over 1,000 projects created in Wasp. First application deployed even in alpha to production. And just recently was a cool milestone. So we had like a first startup project built on top of Wasp, and which actually has revenue coming in. So that was really cool. Like the person built the whole business, deployed it, integrated with Stripe billing. So actually they have a business going on, ran with Wasp. So that was kind of pretty exciting for us to hear.
Definitely, that's a huge milestone right there. That's awesome.
Yeah, lined up really nicely with beta. It was even in alpha, but just now, we released beta, so it was kind of perfect timing.
Nice.
Yeah, that's shortly about the status right now. And yeah, maybe we can now go a bit deeper into the technical side, which I'm sure everybody wants to know more about. So how it actually works. Just from the high level perspective, so Wasp, you can think of it as of a full stack web framework. So we are kind of solving the same problem. It is just technical differences that we are using this language DSL approach. So basically what DSL is, it's like a configuration language. So you can think it's something like a JSON, but a little bit smarter and a little bit nicer to write and read. So how it works is developer describes, some high-level features which you usually use in every application, like authentication, routing, data models, CRUD API, queries. So all that stuff you can specify through Wasp language. We are going to see how. And then you can plug in your React code from one side, your Node.js code from the other side, and implement all the custom logic you need and you want. And yeah, in the end, what's happening, under the hood, we can also see it now in this diagram. Oh, actually, it's here. In this diagram, so we are going to compile, our Wasp code, which is right here. You can see my mouse, great. So all of this on the left side is going to be compiled in a regular React and Node.js application. So this is happening under the hood, and you could even take the way, take the code away and run, but it is not the idea actually, because if you get out, then Wasp cannot help you anymore. The idea is actually that this right part keeps regenerating. Whatever you change on the left side, we are going to regenerate the right side. So you always have the newest version, and basically whatever changes, there's like a new authentication library. When you use auth, we are just going to swap it out for the new version on the right side. Although I must say that the code degenerate is pretty nice and even human readable, so that was very helpful in adoption, in alpha version. But now we are seeing that people are actually not interested in that anymore because Wasp is self-sufficient, so there is no reason to get out. So yeah, that's pretty much how it works from the technical perspective. Nice. And now to talk. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
Quick question about this piece here. We have a comment of someone asking if the front end piece, if it's React, like just plain React, or does it use Next.js?
So right now it's React. So we definitely plan to add the SSR feature. Now we just have to we just have to see is it the best way to use directly Next.js, or we can just replicate some parts for the SSR. But definitely we are going to add support for SSR.
Great, cool, thank you.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, cool. So we can now take a look at a little bit like a sample of the code, just to give you a taste of it, and then we can also see it in the demo. So let me just go one step back. So this is how the Wasp, typical Wasp file looks like. This is just like a little part of it. So it starts, with this high-level declaration. So as I said, it's pretty similar to JSON or Terraform or Starlock. Like those are the languages that you might have used that are kind of very declarative, very specific, and just trying to do one thing well, not trying to be the Turing complete language. So what happens here? You can say, hey, this is my new application, to-do app. Okay, I'm going to have authentication. It's going to use this data model user, which is Prisma data model actually. And then basically with these two lines, I will support username and password, and I will support Google. So from these kind of 8 lines of code, we are going to generate under the hood for you like full stack authentication, both on the front end and back end, and make sure everything works, everything is connected. You just have to plug in, your React and Node.js code if you want, and basically everything is working out of the box. So that is kind of one thing that we are pretty excited about. Then also we have support for routes, pages, and as you see, you can always plug in your, for example, here React code.
I'm just curious about the user entity that's linked there. Is there some form of auto completion, or how does it pick up on the specific model that you want to define or set there?
Good question. I mean, in this case, so basically you have to explain Wasp what is going to be your user entity or principal, is often the name. I mean, typically it's always going to be your user data model, but I don't know, you might name it person, or you might name it a follower, whatever, right? So this just gives you the flexibility to define which Prisma model is actually going to be used, for storing user session data and similar.
Okay, cool.
But we'll also
Is there any auto completion? Let's say when I hit Control Spacebar, will it suggest models or
Also, great question, because Wasp Beta introduced this language server protocol for Wasp, so you'll see it in action in our demo.
Oh, cool!
Nice.
Yeah. The team was hard at work at that one. It was also pretty fun. Yeah. Okay, awesome. We show this part. Yeah, some of the niceties and features, before we move on to the demo. So we have the CLI, and basically it's pretty simple, but also powerful. You can just start a new Wasp project, like Wasp new. Wasp start is, like your npm start just for running, but it runs both front end, back end, gets everything running from you. And in the end, the important command is Wasp build, which basically creates the artifacts for deployment. So it's going to be, on the one hand, it's going to be static files for your frontend files, and on the other hand, it's going to be a Docker image with your server, so you can easily deploy it, like to Heroku, Railway, Fly. We used to recommend Heroku, but now they don't have a free plan anymore. So now we kind of, for your side projects, we recommend Fly and Railway. They seem to have pretty nice plans. But yeah, it's pretty flexible. I mean, we also plan to add, some even, let's say, tighter integration, so you can do it all from Wasp CLI. But for now, you get a Docker image, and then you can do whatever you want. We provide some guides to make it easier for the developer. Awesome. And yeah, we also feature Prisma Studio, which is run. You can just run Wasp DB Studio, and basically, because Wasp is using Prisma under the hood, you get all the niceties of Prisma. So this is what our users like a lot, actually.
Nice.
Yeah, we also see it in action. And other than that, yeah, beta is here. And as you, Alex, also asked us a few questions, we have some pretty cool features in here. For example, now Wasp finally supports TypeScript. You can write your files in TypeScript, and we are adding more types from Wasp side as well every day. So soon it's going to be fully supported and fully typed front end to back end. We added support for Tailwind, which was we just need to have this extra build step, for Tailwind, but now it works out of the box. Cool stuff is, you can also run your async jobs, like generating reports, sending emails. All of that is now powered by PG Boss. And yeah, the last part is, now we have our LSP, which means, we can make a nice integration with every editor. We started with VS Code, and we'll see it in action, but we'll also be adding Vim, Emacs. I'm personally using Vim, so I will be using Visual Studio for this demo, but yeah, I'm also a Vim user. So I'll make sure that comes in soon.
Nice.
And yeah, I'm not sure if I have everything else. I think yes. So now with Wasp beta launch week, I think tomorrow is going to be the final day of our launch week, and we are going to be announcing our first Wasp hackathon, or as we call it, Betathon. So everybody,
nice.
make sure to follow us on Twitter. It's our first hackathon ever. It's going to be pretty fun. We are going to be giving away some pretty cool, Wasp themed keyboard. So this here is just like a demo image. We are still, assembling the keyboard to make sure how it's going to look like. But it's going to be it's going to be yellow. It's going to be cool. So stay tuned. Plus, there's always, a ton of merch and swag from Wasp. We have even, beanies, winter edition. So make sure, to sign up for those.
Oh, heck yeah. I'm definitely going to do that.
Yeah. I see your nice yellow beanie, Alex. So I see you are in trend.
Yeah.
Definitely, it's the winter season when you see that. Yeah.
Nice.
Also, let's see what else. And yeah, I just wanted to say a couple of words about Prisma and why Wasp works so well with Prisma and why Prisma is such a good fit for Wasp. We also just recently published a blog post about it, so you can also find it on our blog. So yeah, the coolest thing about that, you can just you will see it in action. You can just write your PSL data models in Wasp with Prisma, and everything works. Some other cool stuff, for example, Wasp is going to give you warnings. So let's say when you change your your Prisma schema, we will automatically warn you, hey, make sure to run migration. So that's one thing we are doing. Plus, Wasp compiler is parsing the whole PSL syntax, Prisma schema language syntax. So we can also do some cool stuff, like auto-completion and helping you in the future and similar. And yeah, last part, everything which is kind of available from Prisma is also available to you from Wasp. So you can run Studio, run migrations, and pretty much almost every command is going to be accessible to you from Wasp.
Cool.
And I think the last part will just kind of for the future. Yeah, for the future, short term, just adding more UI helpers, starters, applications, templates you can use to run Wasp. So it's going to be a lot of those. Midterm, we are going to kind of lean in more into this kind of understanding of PSL and all the goodies that we can provide for you once we know actually what fields you have, what are you using. I think that's going to be really helpful. And the last part, as we said, I'm not sure if I mentioned, but one of the main motivations for Wasp was to kind of be stack agnostic. Basically, once there is a new version of React or new version of Node, we want always to stay. DSL is always going to stay the same. Like there is auth with Google, it's going to be auth with Google in 10 years, right? So our big vision is with Wasp is kind of to become like SQL for databases, which doesn't change so often. We want to have this layer of abstraction for business logic of your application. So ideally, and that is our future goal, is to support like Vue, Svelte on the front end, Python, Go on the back end, and Prisma is already doing a great job with with supporting multiple databases like Mongo, Cockroach, Postgres as well. So Prisma is basically what Prisma is doing for databases, we want to be doing for business logic of your applications.
Gotcha. That's really cool.
Yeah, so we are very excited about this. Right now it's React and Node, and we are kind of focusing, on speed and just no boilerplate. But future, this is going to be the coolest thing.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome.
Just before the demo, the shout out to the team. So this is our team of, as we call them, Waspeteers, and as we also call the whole community. We are quite a small team, but yeah, we were 2 years ago. We were backed by Y Combinator, went through the batch, also kind of raised our seed round for multiple deep tech investors, and we assembled this really cool team. So you can see here me, my twin brother, Dane Shane here is from US. He's an ex-Red Hat NetApp engineer. And yeah, Martin used to be in Google and Palantir. So we have a team of quite experienced engineers, plus Vince, who I just photoshopped. He just joined us as Devrel a couple of weeks ago and doing a great job. So yeah, we are super excited to be here, and we can focus full time on this, and we are very excited to see what we are going to make actually together with the community.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, that's it. What I had from the presentation. Now I can jump into demo, except if there is some burning questions.
I think there's just a couple things I'll address right now. There's a comment from Devin Rode about what Deno and Wasp have to do with Prisma, and as the presentation showed, Prisma is used under the hood for Wasp. So we're used to handle like some of the entity relationships there.
Exactly. Prisma is like a database layer for Wasp, and like we are doing everything with Prisma.
Yeah. And then with Deno, the new release of Deno, you can actually use Prisma in Deno now by just importing the module, and you can start using it. So that's the purpose of those two there. And then also shout out to Anthony Campolo. He's been active in the chat and excited about all of these Wasp things and Deno things. So shout out to you.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm gonna share my screen. I guess you can see my code, right? I can also make it bigger.
Yes. If you could make it a little bit bigger, that would be great.
Yes, zooming it right now. More, do it more. How is this?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, it's going to do well. Okay, perfect. So I will actually run the application first, so you'll see what it's all about. Can anybody guess from the name what is this application?
Hello world, I think.
So it's called Vospelo. Does it remind you of anything?
Trello. I think it's
yes,
Trello.
Nice work. You won some Wasp swag. Nice job. Yeah. Cool. So just being hosted, I can just open it here. So yeah, I mean, what I did, I just ran Wasp start right here, and now it ran both. You can see in the backend, it ran both server and client on my local machine. So let me just open it here on localhost. And yeah, we have our Vospelo application here. So I will just log in with Google. I already have an account. I think I use this one. And yeah, we have our Vospelo application here. Not suspiciously similar to anything Show Wasp data to Prisma. Nice. And yeah, so it's working.
Nice.
And now we can see what the code looks like. So as I mentioned, during the presentation, we are starting from our main.wasp file. So here's your, now this is a bit huge, but you have your source, you have your main wasp, which is kind of like specification of your application, has these high-level features, and then you will see the source folder, which has your client code, server code, and shared for anything you want to share between client and the server. So let's check out our main wasp file. So we just define some like technical stuff, like which version of Wasp is being used, the title. This is also coming from Prisma, so we can use either SQLite or Postgres or whatever Prisma supports. Now the authentication I shared, we define like, we also have entities below. You can see it here. So we have our user entity, and basically with this like PSL tag, you get to write PSL inside of Wasp file.
Gotcha. PSL being Prisma schema language.
Exactly. PSL means Prisma schema language. Yeah, exactly. So we have this part, and you can also use any NPM dependencies right here. You just have to define them like this. And we have our routes and paging system. You can protect any page you want with this simple flag. And then, yeah, this is interesting, like just using your entities, defining them. So everything is like in Prisma. We have our lists in Trello. We have our cards in Trello. And yeah, in the end, this is also, so basically once you define, your cards and entities, basically, you don't have to define a typical CRUD API like, in REST or GraphQL or anything. We use the system which is called like operations, which is basically queries in the database and actions or like mutations. So basically, query is anything which is reading from the database, and action is anything which is doing mutation or like invoking third-party API or anything. So once you define your query or action, so basically you just say, hey, this query is defined in this file. So let's see, it's a server. We have our query.js, and we have our function get lists and cards. And basically here with the context, you get to use Prisma's SDK, right? So here we use like Prisma. I mean, context is actually Prisma, so it's like Prisma find many, right?
Okay, yeah.
So once you define this function and you explain to Wasp where to find it, you get it immediately accessible on the front end. So you can just import it, in your code, in React code, and basically just invoke it from there. So this is kind of the cool part. You define the function on the backend and basically get it immediately available on the front end. So no need for any API or like typical CRUD stuff that you have to do.
Nice.
So this is how that works. We have this system for that. What I said I'm going to show about the language. So now everything is being nicely highlighted. Everything the VS Code understands what you're doing. So for example, now you can write. For example, let's say we want to use it like a new page, and it's going to autocomplete everything for us.
Ooh, very cool.
iPad or anything. So we have this nice kind of integration with VS Code. It's coming to others as well. So that was pretty cool. And yeah, I think auth is also interesting. So let's say we can take a look a bit more at the auth part. So we define, okay, it's going to be like user data model. We have like a username and password in Google. And now let's say I want to go to our code for that on the front end. So I have here, for example, my login page. So now what we have, so this is like typical, React component. You just define your login page and do stuff. But what happens here is basically you can import stuff from Wasp. Once you define in the Wasp file that you have auth with Google, you immediately get accessible like Google auth button. I mean, this is not the one, right? Basically, this is what you get. You get like login function, or you get login form. If you want to immediately use the form, then you can just get the form and display it in your React component. Or if you want more control, as I did because I implemented my custom login form, you can just use the function and invoke it from the front end. And the final part, if you need more control, you can get access to the backend function and implement your own action query, whatever you need. So we are also using React query under the hood. You will actually see it in some other places. For example, if I go to our main page. So what you were showing you before, like you get this get lists and cards function we defined on the backend, and now let's see how it's used. It's used here via use query. So we have a very thin layer on top of use query, which just helps us with some stuff, and basically you don't have to define keys every time. It's all done automatically. Plus the cool thing is we can do like auto caching validation for you. So for example, I can show it again in our main Wasp file. So once you define, for example, that you have query which is fetching stuff from lists and cards. Let's see, right here. So with this row, we define that this query is basically reading from these entities. It depends on these entities. Like so if list change entity or if cards change, then basically we need to refresh this query, right?
Gotcha.
And then again, we have action create list, and we say, this action create list is going to affect entity list, right? So whenever you run this create list thing on the front end, Wasp will immediately know that it has to refresh this one. So you don't have to deal with anything. Basically, Wasp is making everything always up to date for you.
Cool. Interesting.
So, yeah, and we also have, of course, if you need more control, like optimistic updates or anything, like there's always escape mechanisms how to make use of it. But basically, the default behavior is going to be like good enough in 90% of the cases.
No.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean now you can write your TypeScript. Oh, sorry, Tailwind. I want to say Tailwind, but also TypeScript. So you have like we have our usual classes. We can do whatever we want. We just have to import those two typical files, like post CSS and Tailwind.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, TypeScript is also supported, so you can have your files in TypeScript and import stuff from Wasp. Now we are still migrating our code base from JavaScript to TypeScript, but soon it's going to be full TypeScript.
Great. Yeah, that's awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, that's everything that comes to my mind. Let me just check my list if I forgot anything cool that I want to show. One cool thing. Good that I have my list. So let's say, for example, that we now go back to our main Wasp file, and let's say we change some of the entities. For example, let's say that user has also a nickname. Let's say we have nickname, and it's also string. I'll just save this, and immediately, if I go to Wasp is now going to say, hey, you just changed your schema, your Prisma schema, so make sure to run, Wasp migrate, basically, to update it. So we are taking care of this for you, and I can just now run Wasp db. Let's see what the command Wasp db. What I'm writing here. I know I messed it up. Migrate db. And you can just name it.
Nice. I love little features like that give you little helpful tips.
Yeah. I see. I also have to add default values. I just have to make it optional. So we give you all the tips. Basically, we try to really optimize this developer experience. So it has to be. I think the way for making it optional is by adding
the question mark. I think.
Question mark in the beginning, right? Or here.
At the end.
And it was the nickname field, right?
Yeah.
Like this, right?
Yeah. Then.
Yep.
We do it again. Yeah.
Nice.
I don't even have to know anything. Wasp is taking care of everything for me. I don't even know what I'm doing. Yeah, now we just run your typical Prisma client generation, migration, everything is being done for you, and that's it. Everything works. You can commit it, and your team member just have to pull it, and they will have the latest version.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think looking through this, it's awesome to see the focus on the developer's experience here. I think Wasp and Prisma have the same goal in mind in that respect, that really the developer's experience is what's most important. So that's awesome. Thanks so much for giving us the demo. It was really cool to see. I've played with Wasp a little bit in the past. It's been a little while, but I'll have to pick it up again and give it a try, especially now that the beta is out. But yeah, thanks. Alex, did you have anything else to add before we let him go?
Yes, one question. Is it possible to split the main.wasp file, I believe, into multiple files, by the way?
Great question. So this is one of the next features which are coming, because one of our users, he has a Wasp file of 700 lines.
Wow.
So I think it's time that we enable that. But yeah, we are going to have like two stages. First stage is going to be just basically you can split it, and that works. And then the next more advanced stage is going to be like Wasp modules. So basically you can import them, share them, and it's going to be more like full module system. But yeah, I think just implementing file sharing is like the logical next step.
Nice. That's a feature that we share your experience, and we have some spicy threads where people are wanting that with our Prisma schemas, and we're working on it for sure, just like you guys are. So.
Nice.
Yeah.
I hope we can reuse some of their knowledge and functionality.
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, thanks again so much for joining us. It was awesome to have you on, and I look forward to see how the Betathon goes. I think there's a post about it in the comments right now, but for everyone watching, go try that out. Try out Wasp and see if you can get some swag.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for having me. Super excited to be here, and yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm going to transition one more time, and we'll do a couple of little plugs, and then we can wrap this up. I know this one's gone a little longer, but we had a lot of cool stuff to cover. So I'll be back in just a sec. I feel like we're always swapped.
Yeah,
there we go. There's our faces. I'm terrible with the overlays, but thanks for bearing with me. We do have two plugs really quick that I want to talk about before we end our time here. And so I'll go ahead and share my screen actually. There we go. So the first one is try-prisma. So this is a tool that I've been working on for a little while now. And this week we finally got to release it. And so if you want to give this a try, it's on our GitHub repository, which is Prisma, and it should be in there as try-prisma. What this does is it allows you to set up some of our Prisma examples projects really easily. It'll clone down the repository for you, install node modules, and get you pretty much ready to start experimenting with Prisma in your in whichever project you want to use. The only thing that it'll have you do manually still is perform migrations and seed your database, because we want to allow the users the chance to get to experience that. But it just gives you a quick way to sort of explore and test things out. So yeah, definitely give this a try. And we have a couple of links in the CLI output for feedback and for suggesting new examples. So we'd be very happy if you can think of anything to shoot us some feedback there, and we'll try to implement it when we can.
And for those who probably visited our Prisma examples repository and tried an example already, they'll probably notice that the instruction is also there so that they can try it out for themselves.
Yeah, I'll actually pull one up real quick. If you haven't seen this repository already, it's got Prisma examples. And for example, I'll pull up TypeScript, and we'll just say GraphQL. This is one of the more popular ones right now. So you should see in here that it's now integrated as part of the instructions. So you just specify try-prisma and which template you want to use, and this one is TypeScript GraphQL. So yeah, give this a try and let us know what you think about it. The last plug that I have, though, is a call to action for anyone interested in view support in Prisma ORM. So we're currently speccing out with the product design team how our view support should look. We've got a lot of requests for this feature specifically. And I will actually, as part of the description of this video, I'll be adding the link to this type form in this comment here. And this is just a place where you can quickly go fill out what your needs would be for view support in Prisma. And we sort of present some of the ideas that we've had and ask for some ideas from you here. So if you're interested in being able to support views in Prisma, we would love your feedback here to help us sort of speed along the design process.
Cool, cool. I believe we also have a couple of questions from the chat.
Okay.
Business Technology asked this a while back, and the question is, what's a database that has multiple schemas? What does it mean? Do you want to take that up?
Sure, yeah. So for example, within, I think this is probably referring to the multiple schemas feature that we have, which is specifically for Postgres right now. In Postgres, there's this idea of schemas, which allows you to have different sets of data within your single database. And each of these data sets essentially can have its own data shape. So what this schema is going to do is it allows you to access these different separate pieces of data, these separate data sets within your database through the Prisma client. Yeah,
I think you can also think of schemas in a database layer as like a namespace. If, for example, you can have the users table that belongs to, I don't know, the public schema, or you can have like an auth schema that for the still the same users table as well. So it's more like a namespace, but on the database level, I believe. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. We also have a question from Yosuke Kurami and asking whether do people want to write business logic into models as extensions? Is Prisma aiming for such as an active record or Hibernate? Yeah.
I would absolutely like to start with this one. Okay. So some people do want to write business logic and extensions, and some people don't. And I think that's, I briefly mentioned this earlier, but along the point of Prisma aiming for active record or Hibernate, Prisma itself, we see, at least in general, we see as a building block. So it provides you the ORM, it provides you the tools to interact with your database, but it's up to you as the developer to develop sort of the structure around it. And that's sort of why in the past we've called ourselves not an ORM. We've called ourselves something different because we're really a data mapper. We get your data and we spit it out to you in JSON, and then you do what you want with it. So what these extensions are intended to do is it allows people to more easily set up the structure around their Prisma client. So if they do want to use Active Record or like a Hibernate type of thing, if they do want business logic in their extensions, they can do that. We're basically providing the tools to allow the developer or to enable the developer to do what they want to do with Prisma client.
Cool. I don't have much to add other than it's up to you to do whatever you want. Extensions just allow you to, I don't know, it's an endless list of possibilities on what you can do with extensions. Yeah, and it's not just adding business logic. You can also do stuff like validation, I guess, which also counts as logic. But yeah, so it's again up to you to choose whatever you want to create as an extension. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's certainly best practices to follow, but I think those best practices change depending on the context of what you're working in. So in some cases, it may be the right choice to use an Active Record type of style. It may be the right choice to have business logic and extensions. It really depends on what you're doing, the team that you're working with, and what your goals are, really.
Cool. I think this was a question for Ryan, but unfortunately he's not with us. What if you have two different projects on your computer using different versions of the same NPM module? I think this one was answered, by the way, where you can specify the version yourself, I believe. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I think this was referring to Deno because it uses that shared cache sort of file that Ryan had mentioned. And I think that's right, Alex. I think the thing there is that you can specify the version.
Cool. I'm going through the chat. I can't see any other questions.
I think one more quick one.
Yeah.
Why you need to create a specific language for Wasp isn't JavaScript sufficient? I think Matija would have been better to answer this, but I can go ahead and try for him, and he can message me afterwards if I was wrong. I think the goal here was that they wanted to produce a more declarative language that allows you to more simply and easily structure your application. JavaScript has JSON, but that can be tedious to write and often confusing to read, whereas the Wasp language that they've developed is geared towards people being able to scan through a file and see what the structure should be, which entities are available. So really, it's just, you can think of it as more like syntactical sugar on top of what already exists, like JSON. It's just a prettier way to see it. So maybe it wasn't needed, but the fact that they went through the extra work to build that just shows their dedication to the developer experience, I think.
Yeah, I believe that's about it.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. This was an awesome stream, and I had a lot of fun with it. And I look forward to seeing you guys next time.
Cool. Ciao. See you next time.
Yep.